and mentor of Steve, Dr. Donald Desiccant, who is unable to be here. I guess the last speaker remarked that Steve was restless. I saw Steve as intense. I've known Steve for about 15 years. I met him through Dr. Desiccant. But Steve was a people person. Um, when he made arrangements with Dr. Desiccant to have a named professorship when he was at Vassar. And I traveled with Don, his wife, and my wife to Vassar to remember that experience that Steve had arranged for him. When Dr. Desiccant had to go into an assisted care facility, Steve was very forthcoming and eager to design Don's room there so that it would be pleasant and artistic. Steve was very much involved in Ann Arbor. I'm a chemist, so I would not ordinarily be a friend of Steve's from a professional point of view. So that just shows how outreaching he was, but he talked about the articles that he wrote for the Ann Arbor Observer, about the Ann Arbor community. We talked a bit about his experience in Chicago, about which he was very excited. I got to meet his wife, Dr. Dana, through Steve, and she was a great blessing to me in her practice as a chiropractor. But I think the thing that I remember most about Steve was his intensity and love for his fellow man and woman.
Thank you.
Good morning.
Good morning.
My name is Willis Patterson. I'm an emeritus professor in music. I came to know Steve after having met him many years earlier through Dr. Cruz, who was a major presenter at a music gathering of African American musicians, which I directed here at the university in 1985. Harold Cruz came and spoke, and he had this young man with him, Stephen, who impressed me, but was very, very silent, very soft-spoken and withdrawn somewhat. I came later to find out that that was very deceptive. He was a part of that visit to accompany Dr. Cruz because the situation dealt with music, and I came to find out many years later that Steve had a very pronounced interest in jazz. So we fast forward to about 3 years ago when Steve came to my house and renewed his acquaintanceship with me and told me about a book he was writing, asked if I would collaborate with him, and said he'd send to me copies of the manuscript and ask for my contribution to his opus. After I read the rather lengthy manuscript, it occurred to me that I didn't have anything to contribute to his opus. But he convinced me that I did. And so began a series of discussions that took place intermittently over the last 3 years, ending with just 3 weeks ago. In the process, I learned much about Steve. He was indeed a people person. I come to find out about his family, his background, his travails, both as a University of Michigan student, his successes as a Michigan student, and subsequently his experiences at Chicago State University, all of them. I came away from each of my sessions, of which there must have been at least 30, with Steve, with a tremendous impression of this man's breadth of information, not only about jazz and about culture, African American culture, but about life in general and his ability to relate to that peculiar aspect of the Black American struggle. I was very, very much educated by Steve, even though I'm certainly 25 years older than he. I came to find a renewed appreciation for his mentor, Donald Desiccant, with whom he and I came to the University of Michigan in the same year as students. And I think our return to the faculty was about in the same year. The contribution which Donald Desiccant made to Steve's advancement as a scholar is immense and probably is not going to be fully ever told. Well, I could go on and on with this, but I gathered a great appreciation for Steve in another aspect by becoming personally acquainted with his family, with his sons, one of whom I only met this afternoon. But it expanded my real appreciation for what Steve had to offer, and I was looking forward to his return to Ann Arbor to place upon him a brand new idea about a project which he had envisioned and told me about that would involve some interaction between Chicago State, Northwestern University, and Columbia College. I'm looking forward to talking to his sons about that. In the meantime, I thank the Almighty for the contribution which Steve made, not only to our community in his writings with the Ann Arbor Observer, but also to me personally. Thank you.
Anyone else?
Good morning. Good morning.
Good morning.
My name is Reverend Roy Patterson, and Steve lives across the street from me, him and his wife. And they've been some really, really good people. James Daniel is from Steve's hometown. He's from Steve's hometown. And he said, Troy, you gotta meet a man that's a genius. Well, it took me about 2 months to get around to see what he was talking about. But when I did meet Steve, he talks about everything. And he knew some of everything. And he was a gentleman at all times. And so I would see him and his wife walking downtown holding hands, and Steve always kept his hands going when he was talking. And he was talking about something too when he kept his hands going. And so he told me one thing. I'm from Detroit, and this is my home. And Ann Arbor is a great place. I might have to say honest to our administrator back there, Pat Marine, Reverend Pat Marine. She's an office administrator. Seeing Steve come up there and work with our children and do anything that he had to enhance the abilities of what was going on in Airwood. His wife, she continued to walk through Airwood. It's a peaceful place, and it's a home-loving place. And when I used to talk to Steve, and most of the time, he used to tell me, he said, Troy, I miss my family. I miss my family. I love Ann Arbor. This is where I went to school at, but I miss my family. He was a family man. Me and him got together and built his wife a beautiful garden out in front of her house with yards. I gave him all the rocks I had because Steve was such a gentleman. He loved to play tennis. I used to give him tennis clothes all the time. He said, why you give me all this here stuff? I was a gentleman just like he was. In this life, I learned when you meet somebody, they're on loan to you. And so treat them good. Treat them good. And you're pilgrims and strangers going through this life. And Steve was a gentleman, and I'm so sorry that this happened. And I'm like everybody else, I was waiting on him to bring back the news of what's happening on the election, because he's always doing that. He told me, he said, I'm going to write an article on you. He wants to write an article and put it in our reserve. I said, oh, Steve, you're so appreciative, but I never did go back because I didn't want nothing wrote. But he was a gentleman. So God bless y'all and y'all tender hearts today. And I say thank you for loaning me your dad. Thank you. Yeah. God bless you. I'm going to do it for me.
Yeah.
I don't know whether I can do that.
Steve would have been so happy to see all your faces. You meant so much to him. You really did. And I hear everybody talking about Steve's intensity. When you were introduced to Steve, you had no idea you were going into a hurricane. And it didn't matter who you were or what it was. You were going to be challenged. He loved to challenge. He lived to challenge. He got his most joy out of challenging and to see what your reaction would be. And he would come out with the most outrageous things sometimes. And even our little toy dog, Candy, has been challenged by him. You know, when she would run by him, he would squeeze and pinch her butt. And it made her into a fearless little toy dog. To the point where if there is a Rottweiler, she will go and challenge that Rottweiler. Well, this is what Steve did to everybody that knew him. He really did. And that was the teacher in him. That was the professor in him. Because he challenged our minds. He made us think outside of the box.
Yeah.
Even when we didn't want to think outside of the box. No, I don't agree with you. You know, and it was just, and he would challenge you to the point where you, in the end, you had to see, well, you know, he's right. I don't like that. I don't like what he's saying, you know. It rubs me the wrong way. Even his sons will testify to this.
Yes.
You know, he rubbed you the wrong way many times. You got angry at him. And he loved it when you were angry at him. That made him the most happy because he knew he was touching your soul. And he was changing you, and he was making you grow. He was making you grow intellectually. He was making you grow in every which way you can imagine, spiritually. That's what it was when you got to know Stephen Moore. You were in a hurricane. I feel like I have been in a 16-year hurricane. I have been through Katrina. I have been turned inside and out. You know, the way he has made me think and grow and to become more of what the potential, you know, that is inherently within each and every one of us. He has given us so much for us to be thankful for. And I thank God for putting somebody like Steve on earth, because he's one in a million. You know, he is one in a million. And he was so happy. He goes out with dignity and peace and love. You know, he had so many trials and tribulations in his life. But these last 2 months, he was the happiest of his life. Because he won his case. He made law precedent that is going to affect case law throughout this nation. And if there's any attorneys in the group here, you will know that. Case law has been forever changed by the litigation that he won. Now students have the right. They have the inherent right to edit their own papers themselves. It can no longer go through the faculty, and the faculty can no longer prescribe what is going to go in student newspapers. This is major, folks. This is what Stephen Moore did. On a national level, on the personal level, this is the type of work that he did in his life. And when he went back to school to teach, now he could have been an executive, one of the top administrators, because he won that privilege. But he said, no, I want to go back to teaching. I want to be with the students. I want to be with my people. He was so happy to be on the south side of Chicago where Obama was. He had so much joy in that. He goes, Janice, you would not, he would call me sometimes 10, 15 times a day, telling me what was going on. Because students of his, their kids were being shot. Their relatives were being shot. He was afraid sometimes to walk the streets because all the crime that's going on in the south side of Chicago. But he said, I wouldn't trade this for anything. Because he was with his people. He was making changes. He was advising students how to get from point A to point B, as he would say.